Hi, my name is Jocelyn Frey. I served with my family in the Democratic Republic of Congo for 9 years, and I'm currently serving at the Home Office in Guelph, Ontario. I have 2 kids, Ruth, who is 9, Pascal is 7, and my husband's name is Nick. Growing up, I spent many of my summers attending a Christian horse camp, learning about Jesus in the middle of the Rocky Mountains. It was during my high school years in grade 11 when God really became real in my life. I had learned about God during these weeks in the middle of the mountains, but it didn't really become real in my life. But I remember I came to a time in my life and I was looking for something, and I remember praying one night and saying, God, I really want to be involved in a Bible study. And the next day, a girl in my chemistry class turned to me and invited me to their Bible study. I spent the next few weeks attending their Bible study. Then I started going to the church, and then I started going to the youth group. And it was during that time I really gave my life to Christ. I spent a few years after high school. I attended a discipleship program, and then also went on to helping with hurricane relief. After that, I moved back to Canada, and that is where I met my husband. My husband and I met in 2009. He was already on his way to join MAF. I had just come back from traveling around the United States doing some hurricane relief after Hurricane Ike in Galveston, Texas. And my sister invited me to go skydiving one day. And lo and behold, my pilot that threw me out of the plane that day ended up being my husband. And so one of our very first conversations was, well, if this is going to work, you'd have to be willing to come to Africa. I've always been under the thought and impression that people are people, and deep down, we value a lot of the same things. So after Nick threw me out of his plane, we quickly started fundraising together, and then got married. We spent our first year of marriage in Quebec City learning French, preparing to head to the Democratic Republic of Congo. Once we arrived in DRC, a year later, we had our first child, Ruth, and a few years after that, we had our second child, our son, Pascal. The word missionary, before I became a missionary, I think had a different context. When you would think of a missionary, you would think of someone that is spiritually superior or has everything all together. After spending a few years in the Congo and really delving into being a missionary and do I have a right to be a missionary? Do I have my life all together? I came to realize that to some extent the missionary calling is for all Christians, and it is to bring those that are in your realm of influence one step closer to Jesus at a time. I spent a lot of my time as a stay-at-home mom, and I was at home with my kids, isolated in a very large city where it was very difficult to get out. Who I am a missionary to was my kids day to day, was my house workers, my guards around my house, those who would come and ask for food or for money. And it would be my goal as a missionary to just try to be the light of Christ and resting on God's grace and God's mercy, and realizing that missionaries aren't any more special than anybody else, but just having that intentionality that is one of the purposes of my life, is to bring people closer to Jesus. As we were preparing to move our lives and our ministry to the DRC, my husband had a specific role, and he was going to be a pilot, and he was going to use those skills to be able to reach isolated people. And that left me thinking, what do I have to give? How does God want to use me in this place. We lived in Kinshasa, which is the capital city of the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is a city of about 14 million people. When we talk in MAF about reaching the isolated, you don't necessarily think about, 14 million people in a city, but we would use the capital as a base and fly out to isolated areas. And as I was thinking and praying before we left, I really felt God put on my heart that he wanted me to focus on our team. And a little bit that made me feel like maybe I was betraying what I had signed up to be as a missionary. But I said, but God, I'm going to be a missionary. I have to get involved in a ministry or to be able to help the Congolese. And God really put on my heart. He said, no, you need to focus on the MAF team there. And that really became a reality soon after we arrived, that my husband became the program manager. And that the program manager role is, in all of our programs, very intense. You have to help run an aviation program. You have to help encourage and work with all of the families. You have to make sure everybody's kids are in school and organize team meetings as the expatriate staff as well as the national staff. And when my husband took on that job, I knew that my role would be to make sure that my husband was successful in his job. And that may not be the most glamorous thing for a missionary to say or to be able to do, but I knew that my role and the best impact for our ministry as a family in Congo was if my husband was able to be successful in the very difficult role that he took on. And so a big part of my ministry was focusing on how I could help my husband in his role, how I could support him, and also how I could support our team. One of the most amazing times that I had was during one of our annual conferences that I helped plan. And MAF was wanting to use a tool called Strength Finders. And Strength Finders is a great tool to be able to not only learn about yourself, but also the team around you. And we really had a passion to include our national staff in this initiative. And so I was able to take a lot of the material, translate it into French, and then also sit down with each and every one of our national staffs and to be able to go through this assessment with them and to be able to then talk about what that meant as a team. It was the coolest thing to me to sit down with them, to be able to have them go through this assessment and then have them look at the results and then them go, how did it know? I think sometimes we take so much for granted in North America where, we take, 5-minute personality tests here and there, but a lot of times our nationals haven't never had that opportunity before. And it was so neat for them to really be able to read about themselves, to read about their strengths, and then us as a team to be able to make sure that we're using we're utilizing our national staff's strengths as they need to be used, as they can be used. Most of them haven't had anywhere close to the same opportunities that we've had, but they're just blessed over and over that some of these people could be working for organizations that pay them more, but a lot of them say over and over again that they work for MAF because they're treated like people and they're treated like they have skills, and it was so neat and so impactful for me to be able to work with our national staff in that way and to really be able to incorporate them. It was during those times that I really discovered that I had a passion for equipping people. Whenever I organized these conferences or made these things, I realized that in the depths of my heart, I wanted us to learn together and I wanted us to grow together. And so I really had this passion of each time we get together, how can we learn? How can we grow? And how can we do that while we're, cultures apart and languages apart, and there's babies and there's 2-year-olds and there's, our mechanics and pilots and administrative staff, really became a passion of mine while we were there. Our journey in the DRC took us from arriving, where Nick, my husband, was a pilot, and then he became pilot IT, and then he became pilot program manager, and then just pilot again. And then after 9 years, we came back to Canada. During those times, we had 2 kids. We also had 8 expat families leave and 9 arrive. We had several close national staff friends that passed away. One other missionary, not with MAF, but from a different organization, that died from a mixture of malaria and dengue. And so our time overseas was ripe with instability, not even taking into account the instability of the DRC and living in Kinshasa. So we felt like God was leading us and transitioning us back to Canada. A big reason for this was myself, that I had taken a few years of our time in Congo, and I had finished my degree in psychology, and I also had taken the 9 years we were in Congo, where I was able to be a stay-at-home mom and to be able to help raise our kids. I had come to a place where I really felt like God was wanting to use the skills that He had grown in me, but in a different location, which is when God put on our hearts to work in the home office here in Guelph in Canada at the MAF Canada office. It was really neat to be able to have conversations with the staff here and to be able to dream and talk about the opportunities. And it's really cool to be able to come back here and use my experience as a missionary through the education that I have, and to be able to really help equip and encourage and strengthen MAF missionaries all over the world to be able to make sure that they're successful inside and outside of their ministry, in their lives, in their work, and in all of that. Those are the things that are going to help they're going to help them to be successful. Not just that they can fly well or maintain well, to be able to have a really holistic view of where people are at or what your people are doing, and I'm really excited to be able to be a part of that. During our years in Congo, there was lots of times that were really hard. There was lots of transitions that were really hard, to be able to have friends move and have friends come, and watch our kids transition through that and try to guide them. Also to be able to help keep our families safe through political unrest. We would often have, we would call them PUD days. We would call them political unrest days, where we would all stay home and not drive in the roads because you don't want to get caught in a mob. And it was during those days that you want to make sure the kids are safe, but you also want to make sure that they have a general understanding of what's going on as well. And that's a difficult thing to go through. Whenever we would go through those difficult times, my husband and I would always talk about one of the things that kept us going was just the amazing team that God had placed around us in MAF. It's amazing to see the group of people that God calls into missions. It's a group of people that maybe you wouldn't work with otherwise or hang out with otherwise, and then it's people that you're together on a program with, and you're living and you're working together and really trying to bring God's kingdom to everybody that they can. And everybody has such unique gifts and abilities, and to be able to bring those all together. It was always our team that really kept us going and kept us wanting to support them, and for and the times that they would support us, I think it was a really neat thing to be able to work together as a team to be able to try to accomplish the mission that God had in front of us. In a few different courses and things that I've done, it talks about creating your why and sort of have a purpose statement that gives you direction in each thing that you're doing. And my why that I always come back to is to help our staff, our missionaries, to be successful inside and outside of MAF. Here in North America, we talk about, we have jobs and we have employee improvement and all those sorts of things. And oftentimes missionaries can be sent to the field, and sometimes it is a little bit of out of sight, out of mind. They're working in a program, in an aviation program that they're keeping going. There's program managers that often have an aviation background, but they can't be everything. Here at the Home Office, it's really important to be able to support our missionaries in the ways that they can't necessarily get support where they are. Our missionaries are in the most isolated places around the world. Our missionaries are where they are because they're places of great need. Our missionaries live constantly in times of stress, in times of conflict. Sometimes it's not necessarily large conflict or big things. There's some things about living in third world countries that's sort of just like a water drop, and day after day it can wear people down. And it's really important for us here to go to them and say, what do you need? How can we support you? Here in Canada, I feel very blessed being back here, that life is a lot easier than living overseas. I have a variety of food that I get to eat. Traffic is good. I don't have people asking me for things or for money all the time. I have the capacity to be able to think and plan about things that our missionaries don't necessarily have the capacity to do. And so I'm super passionate, and I feel super blessed to be able to be in a place where I can say to our missionaries and our staff, what do you need and how can I help you to accomplish that? I think it's really cool that I was able to spend 9 years on the field with MAF, and then now I'm able to take that experience back to the Home Office. It's really important when we're working with our missionaries that to some extent we can empathize with their lives and to what they do. And though I haven't been to each one of our programs all over the world, or learned the language that they learned or in the culture that they are in, I have that experience of moving my family overseas, having children and bringing them there, incorporating them into a culture, working with a team, supporting my husband in his work, and then also trying to find out where my role is and how I fit. And now I'm able to take all those experiences, those hardships, those difficulties, those joys, and to be able to be here in the Home Office and look at the MAF world, look wider than an individual program, and to be able to look at a big picture and try to see on how big picture things can be changed. It's important for people with missionary experience to have a say, to have an input on decisions that are made outside of those situations. Because decisions can be made on a comfy chair with a cup of coffee on a sunny day in Canada, and not really recognizing that there could be small aspects of that could be very exhausting for our missionaries overseas. So I think it's really neat that I'm able to have that experience, to be able to bring it here, and then to be able to help influence decisions and thought processes and things like that here in the office, because I strongly believe that if we are able to support and equip and encourage our missionary staff, not only will they be more successful in the field, but we will be able to retain staff longer. They will be able to, things that may have burnt people out or brought people off the field, if we're able to help equip them as much as we can, not only for at the beginning, but in the beginning and during the middle parts, and also when they leave, that we can honor them for their service and make sure that we help people leave well and transition on to the next part of their lives and the next part of their ministries, which is amazing. People aren't going to stay with MAF forever. And for me, that's totally fine. I want the things that I do today for people to be able to bring on to their next ministry and whatever God has for them next. God isn't only moving in MAF. God is moving in many ministries around the world, and God brings people to places and then he moves them around to bring great pollination to different ministries or to different things that are going on. And not only to help MAF be better and to help our ministry be better and help reach isolated people, but we want to, it's so important to be able to develop the entire person and our entire missionary families and our MKs, and to be able to make sure that they are equipped and encouraged in each and every stage of their life with MAF and then also after.